Good morning, everybody. My name's Stephen Broadhurst. I'm the head of customer success at a company called Human First. And at Human First, we help mainly large organizations working with NLU do really good NLU design. I'm going to give you a little bit of background of me and why I'm giving this talk today. So I started my conversational AI design journey about 2013. I was working with IBM. I was really lucky that, Watson had just come out, and I got to work through that whole process of this totally new technology coming in, Watson 1.5 to what went on to become Watson Assistant. I was on the software side. I was on the professional services side, and I was working with the very first large organizations, working out how they were going to train these systems, how they're going to get it to use the tone that they wanted to do, how that whole process was going to work. That's what we're facing now with GPT. How are we going to train these things to do the things that we want them to do? And I was really lucky. I got to set up the conversational design practice in the UK and Ireland. I led a lot of the reference projects at places like Sky and Vodafone for building these first chatbots that went out and did mainly customer support, customer contact scenarios. And out of that, I did a lot of thinking about what does it take to have a conversational analyst, a conversational engineer, whatever you want to call that bot builder. What skills do they need to come in with? And I'm really pleased that over the last 10 years, conversational design's become a really well-recognized field, and we have lovely events like this. But it's got to a point now where I think people assume you can fix everything in conversational design. And in fact, I think it's got to a point where it's actively not actually helpful anymore to be talking so much about conversational design. So my talk is about the missing piece that I see in most conversational projects and most conversational analysts' skill sets. And I'll just start with something controversial. Is that most conversational AI projects that are conversation design-led fail. Because what happens is the business says, we're going to build this chatbot over here, and they give us a whole bunch of constraints about these are the easiest APIs to integrate, and this is what we think users want, etc. And then we do a whole bunch of conversational design, and we come up with this amazing conversation that if users had it, then the experience would be wonderful. And I see people offer courses on doing this process, on conversational design, and they say, let's do BF Fogg, let's do Cialdini's 6 principles of influence, That's great, that's going to help you over here with, if we had this conversation, is it going to be really powerful? Is it going to make a good sales journey? But it helps you nowhere in the middle of how do you get from A to B. And what happens? Well, we baked in a whole bunch of assumptions that start about what we thought the user wanted to do. That's probably not what they wanted to do. Everyone in the team went and did good customer-centric design. That's hugely valuable, right? But everyone imagined how they were going to say it, how they were going to interact. You are not your user, right? And they bake that in, and often there's very poor agreement across the team, with what something actually means, what we're actually building down those low levels. And then, it was over the wall to someone else, and they brought a big set of responses. I'm sure they're great responses, don't get me wrong. And then we took it live, and then people get frustrated, and they say, the bot didn't understand. The CEO types something in and says, look, everybody in my company knows that. Why the hell is the bot getting it wrong, right? Next reaction, get some experts in, dump more training data on it, right? Train, just pour onto that original poor taxonomy, that original poor definition of what was actually going on with the users, what they were actually saying, the different dialogues that made it up. And I see in my work now with large organizations building at scale, millions of conversations, I see so many models that have just had bad data heaped on bad NLU design. And what the work we do now is helping people take that back and actually work out what should be going on there. Yeah, please. Could I get some water? That's right. So NLU design really answers that missing gap in the middle. What you need is cross-team agreement on what you are building with. You have to agree what you mean with the technology and the other people in your team, what the ground truth is, what intents you're using, what entities. And onwards into large language models, this actually becomes even more important because you need to know what prompts you're doing, what searches you're doing, what fine-tune sets you're doing to create, as we heard ask the question, that tone you actually want. To get there, we have to start in a different place. Yeah, we have to start with the actual data. What problems are the users facing, and how do they express that? We're still going to get to this front end over here. We're still going to get to do all that personification. We're still going to get to create an amazing conversation. But we're going to do that on a solid foundation of the data, and having gone through a process where we agree with the machine exactly what it understands in the same that we do. Everyone's talking about having to rewrite their presentations. Well, this was a slide I had in a couple of weeks ago to say, you know, you're still talking about intents. You see the Rasa release on their new intentless model. I love Rasa, very good company, lots of open source stuff up there. But their release for intentless said, to start with, intents are still really important. Okay? Actually, as we go into large language models, I think you're going to find that we might not be calling them intents anymore, but actually some of the fundamental NLU design artifacts you need to build are going to be increasingly more important. Right? Little thought experiment. You build an amazing new generative chatbot using all the latest tech. Your boss says, is that any good? And you say, it's brilliant, right? We trained it, and then we tried it on our top 20 customer queries, answered it brilliantly. Okay, well, that's interesting. How do you know what your top customer queries are? Right? How do you know what the 20 most common ones? How do you get a good example of that customer conversation to run it through? Right? Those are all NLU design questions. And I'd like to introduce you to two new words, which I think are going to be really big parts of all our lives going forward. And they are supervision and observability. Because we're the people tasked with this third wave of conversational AI that's coming. And we're going to have to move from this kind of intent and entity-led, dialogue-led systems into these new generative responses. And the number one question you're going to be asked is it doing the right thing in production? How do we release this safely? Right, that's going to be supervision. You're going to want to give it real-time prompts and instructions that keep it on track and give it the data that stops it hallucinating. New GPT-4, 52 pages of context you can give it, right? So how are you giving that data in real time to stop it going off track? And I can say, having built and launched and taken live bots on GPT-3 and 3.5, that if you give it the data it needs and clear guidance, it can sort through that and pick it out. It's most likely to hallucinate when you're asking it something that it hasn't got the information to respond with. The second is observability, and that's then the next question that comes. Okay, you tried it on the top 20 circumstances. That's great. We could have built that with rules. Show me an example where it doesn't work so well. Like, given these user inputs, what's the variability of prompt that I could be getting? What's the risk, right? That's observability. We've gone from having bots which we knew exactly what they were going to say, we had hard-coded the response, to having bots where they could say literally anything. That's so much more human, right? And we face the same with our call centers right now. Those humans are the best AI we have, right? Best human intelligence we have, and we're worried about what they're saying to customers. Like, we have an incident, the call center goes down, the system goes down, we appear a bad in the paper. What are they saying about this latest incident? Right? If I phone up and ask now, am I going to get the right answer? And it's been a challenge in our call centers to very rapidly update them, to give them the coaching they need, give them the content they need to answer those difficult customer questions. Well, you've just suddenly got that with all your bot systems. How are you going to observe what they're going to say before you release it, and how are you going to observe what they say after you release it? So, maybe intents isn't a trendy word. Let's talk about classifications instead, okay? Can anyone tell me what this is up on screen right now? It's not a trick question. Okay, gorilla, fantastic. Can I ask you a follow-up question? This is a mammal, right? Yeah. So my boy went to the zoo, and he's quite little, and he said, pointed at the gorillas and said, Daddy, can we go and see the monkeys? Was he right? He's understood. He's recognized, like, these things kind of look like monkeys, and that looks like a really big monkey, Daddy. Can we go and see it? One of the best bits of pedantry in the English language is people love to tell you, right, it's an ape, not a monkey. Well, let's think about that a little bit, because this is the formal classification for a Western lowland gorilla. And it's a mammal, it's a primate. It's also a simiform, simians, you might be more familiar. It's also an ape, a hominid, right? Well, simiforms are the monkeys, right? So yeah, it's an ape, but you're not too wrong to call it a monkey. You could make a very good answer that it's a monkey. And the reason I picked this particular animal for this example, the Western lowland gorilla, is because actually we found that gorilla wasn't enough. Like, you were totally right, it is a gorilla, but then there are subspecies, and actually you have gorillas that are then gorilla, and this is gorilla, which I think is very funny and also the most specific example of. What do we go through in that? We did a piece of classification design. We needed to know what hierarchies are important. We need to know what granularity of distinction was important. We need to understand which represents that well. Right? If you ever need to know the difference between an ape and a monkey, basically apes have got bigger heads and no tails. Monkeys have got smaller brains and tails. We needed that example to give to the system. Right? Your NLU system, you can't have that nice chat with. Right? Even the LLMs, in terms of prompt engineering, it's not going to be the same way of training them. Right? These are example-led systems. You need to be able to find out, what classifications do I need? How do I give examples of them? And then, are they well differentiated from the other groups? You know, give me examples which fall across the boundaries. You know, what are the problems my user is going to find? And these are really, really, really classic NLU design questions, which you're going to have to find a space to do. And the number one thing I find at teams is they don't have the skills to understand these. They often really still, with intents and entities, mix these up where they're supposed to use. They're very different concepts. And they don't have a space to do this work. Normally, some hodgepodge of spreadsheets and Jupyter notebooks and you know, cross-team interaction. Like, to be able to answer these questions, we need two things. We need the data. Now, when we started these new cloud AI systems a decade ago, there wasn't the access to data we have now. People weren't having conversations with bots or in call centers or with voice IVRs in the way they are now. That data is present in every single large organization you work with. You get something at the start of your call saying, this call is being recorded for training purposes. What do companies do with that? They review maybe 1%, put the rest in the bin, right? That should be used to train the project, to train the product. We are actively telling them everything that's wrong with their service right now, and they are not listening, right? The tools to analyze that data at enormous scale are well established. You know, semantic similarity and clustering, you can very quickly sort, group, and find the examples you need. And the other part you need to do this is there's been a missing person in the room for most of the projects I see, and that is the NLU technology itself. Doesn't matter what you think something's mean. I see so many projects fail because they put some very, very complex internal business logic, which has no grounding in the NLU or semantics, into their intent design and then complain when it doesn't understand. Right? Bring that NLU technology into the design process, design with it, design things that it can differentiate and understand, and then build your beautiful conversation. Like, we all want to get onto that stage, but do it on a firm basis. So, in teams, normally there is somebody who can do some of this work, right? But these processes are well established now. And normally the gatekeeper for that is Python. Like, you have a bunch of data scientists with a bunch of scripts which then do this magic. What's the fastest possible cycle time you have with a data scientist? You know, maybe 30 minutes, you know, email him, see if he's busy, she's busy, come back to you. My experience, probably 3 or 4 days of chasing for the, right? You can't work in this. You're never going to be able to scale your models, keep up with these LLMs, get to the level of granularity and specificity that you need, unless everybody in the team can have access to these and understand the techniques involved. And so we're trying to build a set of tooling which makes that a repeatable process which you can get through in 30 seconds, not 30 minutes or 3 days. And it doesn't need to be mysterious or difficult, although this video is probably too small for you to see, so it might be slightly mysterious from here. But this video is about 3 minutes long, and it goes through taking 5,000 customer conversations, 90,000 utterances, finding the top problems in them, deciding to look at refunds, and then segregating out the type for this fictional clothing retailer online of return problems. And in about 3 minutes, we're going to find out that they are wrong sizes, wrong colors, stained items. We're going to find out there's just general returns, and we're going to build really, really high quality models, and then we're going to test them. And because we built them from the actual data, and because we built them with the NLU technology in the room, and that could be Cohere, that could be OpenAI, that could be Watson, that could be Google. We have standing integrations for all of those. It will be built in a way the classifier understands, and you can have very, very high confidence of that working in production. So final slide. In thinking about the skills that you need for your projects and the skills that we need to have as conversational designers, maybe you are in the very lucky position that you can have a copywriter, someone told me to say a content engineer, or someone just writing the copy. Maybe you can have an outright data scientist in your team. Maybe then you can also afford a dialogue engineer, just doing the dialogues and flows. Maybe you can even afford to have an NLU engineer, like 4 people. Where do they work? What is their common language? How are they doing that, right? And actually, rather than putting all those up here, we've got perhaps, the far left of that is someone who loves language and building copy, and the far right of that is someone who loves data, etc. They need to meet somewhere in the middle. And really what I see is that companies can't afford these massive, complex teams. They can't afford the slow cycle time, the over-the-wall stuff that engenders. And what we're seeing is the rise of the full stack, call them what you will like, bot builder, conversational engineer, conversational analyst, conversational developer, who understands these techniques from data science, understands these techniques from copywriting. They don't need to know Python. They have somewhere to work. They love language, and they can rapidly build very high-quality systems. So that's the end of my talk. I think I'm pretty much exactly on time. I've got questions now. Ultimately, my talk is saying, out there, if you don't know how your corporation does NLU design, don't be surprised that your projects fail, right? I think we've learned how to do conversational design. That bit in the middle, if you're thinking that, we don't have a tool to do that, we do use a lot of spreadsheets, we do have a lot of the overall things, and we don't have a formal design process, addressing that area, however you do that, is probably the #1 thing that you can do to arm yourself for this future generation of large language models that are coming for us.
Here. Can I have the mic, please? Can I have the mic, please? Thank you. Or I can just shout like that. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Especially the taxonomy that you showed. Linnaeus, of course, another famous European binomial nomenclature, binomiale nomenclatuur in Dutch. And this is, of course, what we... Is it working? Is it off? No, it's not off. Never mind, I'll just do it like this.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I checked my bingo and I forgot to mention GPT-4, NLU, and integrity, and the EU, so I'm sorry.
I also didn't hear you mentioning bullshit.
Well,
there you go. Thank you.
Did you hear my prep? Because that was actually part of it. I had something at the start, which is all content is shit. We should be more specific. I mean, visual design or NLU design, but
if taxonomies, people embrace taxonomies, that your first steps towards ontologies and all kinds of structured content that might help you big time, and it will make your NLU life so much easier. Any questions from the room or online? Let me check. Do we have any online questions? No online questions? One question over here.
I'll do this one first, and then we can come across.
Yeah, very, very interesting talk indeed. Two comments. First of all,
could you introduce yourself?
oh yeah, sure.
Forget that.
So my name's Alex Monaghan. I'm from Ciara Testing Company, background in AI and linguistics. And what you're describing, first of all, sounds an awful lot like what we've been doing in voice since about 28. So people collect data, people analyze that data, people work out what customers are really saying, and then you build a model, and then you test that model, and so on. I'm not sure that this is anything new, but I think that the ease of doing this in text, and also the massive amount of data that is out there now, have persuaded people that you can do this without analysis. Would you comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Where to start? None of this is new. This is a 30-year-old field which is changed from rule-based grammars with Prolog to probabilistic models, and then people are trying to work out how to build with them, right? So that's been the fundamental technology change, the advent of GPU-led training. In voice, I think you make a good description. You know, I would add on that people then go in and say, oh, our ISR is really bad, and it has all these false positive words, and we're going to throw a huge number of like just hint entities, stroke keywords, stroke stuff in there, and they come up with a really bad model. That has also changed overnight with Whisper and other technologies, so like that. The quality you can get out of transcription means that this is absolutely doable on scale. Scenarios which everybody wanted to do 10 years ago are suddenly just now possible with the better ASR. Our platform is just trying to say, over the last 10 years, we have really codified for conversational AI, my speciality, but also for call centers, what we need to be doing. Let's just put that together in a holistic tool that says, these are the processes made simple, not done in data science language, put under everyone's fingertips to get through to that. I'll answer the last part of the question is that I think every company is or thinks they are very special and has ways they want to talk about things and almost certainly needs unique models. I go to call centers and I see people using models which are incredibly general. They're like, you know, how well did it get greeted? How well did they have empathy? How well were they closing all the time? And when I look down through these models, it's so generic as to almost be useless. You know, whereas those companies have real questions they want to be getting out of their data, real ways of talking. So for me, the challenge is huge amount of extra rocket fuel going in with large language models. How do you take that technology and build something that's really useful for your business and then maintain and iterate it really quickly?
Absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for that. Give it up again for Stephen.
Super. I think that